Hello and a very warm welcome indeed to this latest edition of Quadriga, coming to you from the heart of the German capital, Berlin. This week we're focusing on developments in France, where in the very near future, in just a couple of days' time, in fact, the Euro 2016 soccer tournament kicks off. But ahead of the tournament, there's little sense of euphoria. In fact, many parts of the country have been in the grip of chaos. This after the CGT trade union declared war on the labour market reforms that President François Hollande and his government say they are determined to press through. Meanwhile, with more strikes ahead, the people of France are still living in fear of another possible terror attack. So our question here today on Quadriga is this: crisis in France, how wounded is the Grande Nation? And to discuss that question, I'm joined here in the studio by three seasoned observers and analysts. Let me introduce them to you, beginning with Pascal Thibaut, who is with Radio France Internationale. He says the trenches of Verdun have only now been filled in, but in the rest of France, the rifts are still huge. Each and every reform becomes a battle to end all battles. Also with us is Malte Lehming of Berlin's Tagesspiegel newspaper, who believes that France's economy is showing signs of improvement. François Hollande must stay on course with his reforms and not give in to left-wing demands. And a warm welcome too to Géraldine Schwarz, a French TV journalist and documentary filmmaker who is based here in Berlin. Géraldine says the unions are still powerful, but fewer and fewer French people support their confrontational course. They've understood that France has to change. So, Géraldine, I'd like to begin with you. And it's been a terrible 18 months, the last year and a half for France. Charlie Hebdo, Bataclan, state of emergency, economic woes, and so on and so forth. Give me an idea of what impact that has had in France in emotional terms.
Well, I think France is really having very difficult times in the last year. But most important, I think, is to focus on what these traumas could change in the country. And I think the trauma of the terrorist attacks brought the French people together. So there was a real solidarity movement, which I consider to be quite positive. The problem now is that with the strikes, this solidarity has been shaken. And I see France divided in two, with one side still having a very romantic view of protests and trade unions, and the other half realizing that France has to change, consider the challenges in a globalized world that France is facing now. And of course, part of these French people who are willing of change are the unemployed people, who are more than 10% of the country, and they are actually willing to change. So the paradox is that the people who are in the street and with the trade unions are those, most of them, who are actually having a job.
Tell me a little bit more about the romantic view that you just talked about there of strikes and protest.
Yes.
That is specific to France, it appears.
Well, I think the trade unions are very linked with the history of liberation and resistance during the Second World War. So this is where starts the romantic view of the trade unions. But if one looks, gives a more precise look, the evolution in the 30 years is that the trade unions are less and less powerful because there are less and less members. Even in bastions like the fields like energy, where the CGT, which is leading the protest right now, had 40% of the workers in this field were unionists, and in the 30 last year it was cut in two. So this gives an orientation. And also, even if the polls says that almost half of the French are against this law, it doesn't mean they are actually supporting the trade unions. And a very recent poll said that 7 from out of 10 French people are actually distrusting the head of the CGT.
Yeah, these are very interesting facts. Let's just talk about the backdrop to the divided France. The current backdrop is the build-up to the Euro 2016 football tournament, Pascal. France is hosting the tournament, obviously 51 matches. I've been reading that the tournament is set to bring 1.2 or 1.3 billion euros into the country. It was supposed to be a great sporting spectacle, a time of joy. That's not how it feels at this point in time, I sense.
Yeah, that's true. It means we still have more or less 1 week to go till the beginning of the competition. So there is still hope. But of course, it's supposed to be a period of joy. It is very important also for the government, for the image of France, of course, abroad, but also for the, to improve maybe the mood of the French population, which is nowadays not actually the best. And there are also maybe some economical problems linked to these strikes. If the strikes will go on after the beginning of the competition, as Malte Lehming has already said, there are some signs showing that the French economy is improving, and that is also one of the arguments of the government, saying that it would be an error to interrupt this good evolution. It is the new mantra of François Hollande to say more or less every day, France is going better, ça va mieux. All the French people are not absolutely convinced, but there are some statistics, showing that there are some improvements, but the situation, generally speaking, remains quite bad, and the mood of the people is especially very, very bad.
Not everybody in France is convinced. Malta perhaps is. So things are improving.
If we pronounce it on slowly improving, not improving but slowly improving. We have I think a growth of 0.5%. Some better mood in investments and things like that. It's very, very slowly. The hard times are for the unemployment rate, especially the young unemployment, 25% or 24%, and more than 10% the unemployment rate at all. That means that the expenditure for social services, unemployment support and everything like this is very high. And it stays high, and the debt rate is almost 100%. I think it's the 15th out of 18th years when it's above the Maastricht criteria of national debt that is allowed, and these are bad signs for itself. If you see signs for improving, that might even spur the opposition saying, if we improve, why we need all the reforms? So this could be a backdrop in the argument of President Hollande. What we see is a battle of two very, very weak parties. President Hollande is weak because of, I think it's 14 or 15% of support of his policy. And the CGT is struggling for survival for in between the trade unions. And because the second largest trade union already supported the reformist agenda of President Hollande. So we have two very, very convinced sides, but very weak sides. This explains the fierceness of the fight.
We're talking about the fight. You're nodding, Géraldine.
No, well, actually, I think we should always consider the situation today in comparison to the situation, for example, in '95, when there was one of the hugest strike ever in France, and there were more than 2 million people in the streets. So I don't think that I think the confrontation today is useful in order maybe to have the trade unions reform. The trade unions have to reform. It's not only about...
You're acting as though all of this confrontation on the streets of France...
Yes.
Pascal was comparing it in the quote that I had at the beginning of the show to Verdun. He was talking about the battle of all battles. France is a battlefield, and you're telling me that it's a kind of theatre, political theatre, and nothing more.
No, there are between 150 and 300,000 people were in the street last Thursday in all France. So I'm just comparing the figures, you know. And this is also something that we have to say. There are no mass demonstrations in the street.
But there is one big difference compared with the huge strikes 1995 against the bill of the former Prime Minister Juppé and other strikes in the last years, also during the reign of Nicolas Sarkozy. It is the first strike with this dimension against a left-wing government. The last one was in the 80s. So it is a different, of course, it is a big challenge, maybe a historical one, I don't know, for a left-wing government in France. And it is also, I think it's more or less a culture fight between the CGT, former Communist Union, more or less, and the reformist ones, the second union, the CFDT, and also a president who now, more or less, wants to make France more or less like a little German, more social democrat.
OK, we'll talk about that in just a second. We haven't yet quite identified whether we're talking about a sort of an abstract field of conflict or a fierce battlefield, but certainly we know what the conflict is all about at this point in time. It's focusing very much on working conditions. Let's just get some numbers and some facts here.
It's one of the world's most far-reaching welfare states. French workers are allowed to retire in their early 60s. They only have to work 35 hours a week, and the minimum wage is almost 10 euros an hour. But the French still love to go on strike, more than any other nation in Europe. Do they have reason to? Unemployment has dropped slightly, but it's still a whopping 24% among the country's youth. Small and mid-sized businesses have it tough. Profits just can't keep up with wages, social security payments, and a heavy tax burden. The French president hopes the changes will create new jobs by giving employers more flexibility to fire and negotiate working hours and bonuses directly with workers. Currently, they have to adhere to sectoral agreements. But is reform even possible in France?
That's the question. Is reform even possible in France? Géraldine?
Yes, well, I think that it is possible for half of the people and it's not possible for the other half. France is really divided, which is a new figure because I think a couple of years ago the figure would maybe more be at 70 and 30%.
Who are the two halves? Fill me in on who these two halves are that you're talking about.
I think in one of the half, it's the young people who are frightened of unemployment. They also see, I mean, they travel a lot. They are more open. Some of them had experiences in Britain, in Germany, so they are also used maybe to other conditions, and they are more open to it. And one, I mean, part of the other half, I would say, is quite old, fashioned people whose fear of the future I also understand, because the future is unknown for everybody in Europe. So I think it's more the fear of change, which is also what we're talking about. But I don't think we can say that France is incapable of reforms. I think this is the test. This is a very important test right now. And if Hollande fails, I don't care if he's not elected next year. But what is important is that this will be again a discouragement to make further reforms. So it's in this on this point, it is a very, very important conflict right now.
Pascal, you're looking very thoughtful.
Yeah, I think it's possible to, of course, to have reform in France, but the difficulty is that we don't have a society like in Germany where there is a lot of dialogue, where you have a lot of strong organization between the people and the government. You usually have a new bill, like the new one. Sometimes there is a dialogue before with the different organizations, with the employers, with the trade unions. But there is a new bill which is adopted, and afterwards there are big strikes. So and that is what the government tried to do at the beginning, after the election of François Hollande, to organize a dialogue between trade unions and employers' organizations to find a solution. And this solution, or the solution which were adopted, became afterwards a bill. So it would be a better solution, I think. And of course, the difficulty nowadays is the strong unpopularity of the government and the fact that Hollande now starts new reforms, which probably would have been it would have been better to introduce them at the beginning after his election, but he had a program and he was elected on a quite left-wing program.
Absolutely.
And these reforms 4 years ago would have been impossible. We saw 1995 what happened with Chirac when some months after he introduced reforms which were completely different from his program.
Yeah. But I will add something to the dialogue thing, which I totally agree with you. Adding something means to add the honesty. It's not just dialogue, we need honesty. I have the German glasses on, so I remember quite well the Chancellor Gerhard Schröder when he introduced the Agenda 2010, and he, from the beginning, said it will be painful. We need to support people, but we have to demand something from the people. So I don't see that the President Hollande right now is being seen as honest as Gerhard Schröder was when he introduced the reformist agenda. So he's always saying we all will be better off, but that it will be painful. And what it means, if we look not abstract but in concrete terms, what kind of painfulness we will receive, this is lacking totally in France, I think.
Yes, but Schröder had the chance to have totally other mentality in the trade unions in Germany, and therefore
right.
I totally understand what he's saying. I mean, the trade unions in France, first, it's 7%, they represent 7% of the workforce, 18% in Germany. And second, they are not at the supervisory board of the companies. This is a very big difference. So they are not actually, they don't face the problems of the companies. So they don't understand their challenges.
I know, and they have a power which they don't really deserve. I mean, it's written into the laws in France that you have political strikes.
Yes.
But that's what is done right now. It's not that if you go in the nuclear energy forms, everything.
Maybe the companies should invite
strikes.
them at to participate at the supervisory board. Yeah. To understand the problem of the company. And also the trade unions in France are much more defending the wages. And in Germany, they defend the work, the employment. This is so they are able to make sacrifice in order to save employment. So they have they look much more further in advance than the French trade unions.
I mean, we have only spoken about the trade unions, but I mean, the capacity to have a dialogue is also a necessity for the employers' organization. And when the chairman of the employers' organization in France, the MEDEF, compares the CGT, the trade unions, with terrorists, I'm not sure it will improve the dialogue.
Yeah.
OK. Let's move on a little bit with some pictures, because, I mean, you're talking about the role of the trade unions in all this and the clash with François Hollande. It's very much turning out to be a clash between the hardline trade union leader, Philippe Martinez, the head of the CGT, the powerful trade union, and François Hollande. Let's have a little look at that before we continue the discussion.
The protests in France are being organized by one confrontational figure in particular, Philippe Martinez. The head of its oldest union, the CGT, has declared the government an enemy of the people and insists it has to give in.
The workers have their say and the government needs to listen. The ball is in the government's court. If they tell us we're going to start all over again, it'll all stop straight away. I guarantee it.
The battle for workers' rights in France has turned into a public war of words between two figures. François Hollande is fighting for his political survival and re-election in 2017.
I want to make this law that I consider to be a law of progress, a law for all, the law of all.
But can the French president push through his reforms, or will the protests drive him to his knees?
Pascal, Thibaut, who's going to win this battle between Mr. Martinez and Mr. Hollande?
I think the best solution would be if there are no losers, because it's important, of course, for the government not to withdraw its text. Otherwise, Hollande would lose the rest of credibility he has, and this credibility is very little. And it's important, I think, that the CGT, also we have already spoken about that because it's also a struggle for the CGT for the future of this trade union. And it is important also that they don't lose formally So maybe the solution would be not to withdraw the Article 2 of the bill, which is the central content, but maybe the government could accept some compromises about some other aspects of the bill. So the government and the trade union and the CGT could at the end, show up like winners or like half losers. I don't know.
We're talking about winners and losers. Surely, or maybe I'd like to ask this question: who are the winners in all this? The Front National.
Sure.
Could be. I mean, the overall mood is if people are not willing they in principle support reforms. 70% saying, yes, we see the necessity that we need reforms. 70% are against the specific reforms program. So we always have this kind of contradictory
People
mood.
Want change, but they don't want the reform.
Yes, they want change, but they don't want to change.
Yeah?
So it's kind of contradictory, and it's overloaded by a general sense of injustice that we see in all of Europe since the financial crisis in 2008, when the government were supporting all these banks, falling banks, and things like this with the tax monies and so on. So a general sense of the elite is doing what they want, and they collect all the money they want, but we have to pay for this on the agenda of a reformist policy. So this is overloaded by this general mood. So this makes it very, very difficult. But I think sometimes, I mean, it's always a non-brainer to say that in politics you have to make compromises. Nobody has to lose. Sometimes people have to lose. Maybe the CGT has to lose this battle, because the heart of the reformist agenda, from which President Hollande says it's the cornerstone or the heart of my policy as a president, has to survive. There could be, I mean, compromises for like 5 or 10%, but not for the heart of this reformist agenda. Otherwise, it will not be a compromise, but a lost battle for President Hollande.
You were talking about 50% of French society that you understand, but are sort of unwilling to change. And Marine Le Pen, with the Front National, she is offering these people a vision of a sort of a national workers' paradise. Is that a convincing vision in any shape or form? Could that be the future for France? Could she be the next president, and her economic vision?
I don't think she has an economic vision at all. That's one of her biggest weakness is economy, actually. And most of the time in interviews, in economy questions, she just doesn't have any answer. She doesn't have an economic problem. I mean, she wants France to go back to the franc. You know, she wants France to go out of the European Union. This is not an economic program. But I think she can just of course, the winner. If there are two losers, the winner is her. You know.
But she's fueling, I would say, she's fueling the ideology of there's this corrupt, immoral, elite structure that we have to fight.
Yes, but this has been going on for a long time. This idea of the elite being corrupt and being far away from the people, coming from this Grande École, from Paris. This is not really new. I think I'm not even sure she can really win anything out of this strike. I don't know. I haven't seen any.
Just before, Pascal, an astonishing figure I read while I was reading up for the programme, yeah? Researchers at Edinburgh University believe that they can show that 53% of French voters would like to hold their own vote, like the Brexit in the UK that everybody's talking about here. They would like to hold their own vote on the possible Frexit. Does that sound plausible to you?
Yeah, the Frexit is also something France is talking about. I think it's absolutely an illusion, and with the Frexit, of course, the European Union will come to an end. Without France, I think it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, that's also as Géraldine already has said. That's one of the proposals also of Marine Le Pen. And of course, his economical proposals are absolutely nonsense. But I think, she is probably nowadays the Front National is the party which attracts most of the workers in France, and it's interesting also to see how the contacts or the relations on a new, it's of course informal or on the basis between workers or between workers from the CGT and members of the Front National, because they want to do something for the workers to convince them there is another solution which is wrong.
OK, Pascal, thank you very much for that. Géraldine, thank you too. Malte, thanks very much for joining me. I hope we've given you plenty of food for thought. The question we were trying to answer is, how wounded is the Grande Nation? I hope you've enjoyed the show. Come back next week if you have. Bye-bye. Tschüss.